What's up, y'all? It's NetworkBret. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a day in the life. I'm gonna be using a whiteboard function, just talking it over. I'm not gonna film at work. So if you wanted that, it's not really that. But I am gonna describe a little bit about my job. Um, so I work at a network operations center. It's a big kind of gov tech company where I'm not directly working for the government, but I do a lot of stuff for the government. So I can't disclose everything. It's not top secret, but I also don't want to give away unnecessary information, if that makes sense. But basically, we just monitor a ton of alarms. I'm going to do a little bit of a breakdown. So, my desk is basically just 4 monitors, right? And the funny thing about it is, it's not all one system. So, the legalities of it working for a quasi government thing, some of the things we touch are a little more secure than others, and some need to be completely separated. So basically, we have like an internal monitor. That's the internal. Then I have the like one of the gov ones, or no, two. Two are gov basically, and then this other one is for things we monitor remotely, right? So I have 4 screens essentially, and I monitor different things. So these are actually separated on different desktops, which is also very interesting. Um, so the internal one, we have our own desktop. The quasi-government one is a different desktop. So both of those go to one. This goes to that. And then the remote one are actually on some Raspberry Pis in like a switching center. So all the remote ones go to this huge switch type thing. It's not a, I forgot what it's called, but it's this huge program. And what this program does, on top of sending it to this computer screen, this one, it also hooks up to this giant wall of screens. So there's a ton of screens on the wall, over 30, and then I have 4 screens on my desk. So as you can see, a lot of screens. I feel like I'm, working at NASA or something. I'm not, but it just looks like an important room. It feels like an important room. It is somewhat important. But let's get to what I actually do. So each of these screens has a lot of different alarms. So I pretty much just look through them all day. So, um, hold up. Gotta make this visible. So let's just say we get an info alarm, get a bunch of info alarms. We don't really see those. These show up as white. Then I get minor, majors, criticals. And it gets kind of complicated because for each one, it's different. Now, to go back to my example of me looking at the wall, how I deal with majors, minors, or criticals might be different for each system I'm watching. So the government system, you're going to react to them all a little bit differently. The remote systems, you're going to react to them differently for each one. So for every screen on the wall that I watch, these different alarms are going to come in, right? So maybe half of them, the majors, I have to call within a certain amount of time. So something goes down in our system, I have to let the local tech know. The criticals, on some of them, they don't even let you know. So don't know if this is making any sense, but I see these alarms come in, and what I have to do is I have to acknowledge them. And that sounds weird at first. The first time I heard it, like, what are you talking about? So you click it and you literally acknowledge it, and it quits blinking. I mean, that's it for the ones that aren't a problem. So some infos will pop up and some majors will pop up. And I have to decide whether or not I have to dispatch a tech out, basically. How I decide is I look at something called an alarm matrix. And if you've never heard of what an alarm matrix is, it is basically just a spreadsheet. So I'm going to go roughly over what an alarm matrix is. I'm going to basically doodle one out. So for every alarm that you see, there's a related point in this alarm matrix, which is just a spreadsheet. So basically, you'll have a spreadsheet, at least in my experience, and it'll say, let me think of a better example. Let's just say the network century went down. So network century. At some sites, it might be a major. At some sites, it might be a minor. So they'll usually have something beside it that will say, major. And then some of the spreadsheet, every spreadsheet is different. If this sounds confusing, it's because it honestly is. It is confusing. So every spreadsheet for every system we monitor is different. So every time I see an alarm, if I don't happen to remember it off the top of my head, because there's like hundreds of sites, thousands of alarms, I have to go manually find the spreadsheet to see what to do. So most of the time, they won't say it right here. Like this one might be a call, for example. That network century is a major and it's a call. But others, for other sites, might say, oh, if the network century is down, then it's a minor. But they don't always say what to do next to it. Sometimes there's a whole other page. So a whole other page of the spreadsheet where it says what to do for minor, major, critical. So this one might be an email. Maybe this one is still call. Maybe this one's call and email. I'm making this up, right? But this is the essence of what my job is day to day. I see an alarm, I acknowledge the alarm, and then I go figure out. I mean, maybe before I acknowledge it, it doesn't matter as much if I acknowledge it or if I go ahead and call it out first, right? So it gets confusing because a lot of the alarm matrices, which are really just Excel spreadsheets, it turns out everything is just an Excel spreadsheet. But so I look at these alarm matrices, and then I have to decide what to do from there. And some of them, like this first one, is right there. Some of the alarm matrices, like the second one, are right there. For the third one, I'm going to write it down here because there's some even weirder ones where it's not even in it. It'll have a little bit more nuance. So the third one might say majors are service affecting or something like that. Excuse my handwriting. I'm trying to write fast, but in some spreadsheets they might not even be so specific. There's a little bit of nuance there. It's service affecting. Well, then you have to know a little bit about the systems, which you learn over time. I feel like NOCs are mostly trial by fire. Mine definitely is. So, without going into too much detail, this is pretty much what's going on. So I'm at my desk with all this stuff to look at. I'm looking through each of them. We actually get assigned a section to look at. So I might not look at the whole wall. I might not look at the government that day, the quasi-government. I might just look at the remote ones, So you're not watching everything at once, but you are watching a lot and it can get overwhelming. So while we're doing the alarms, I'll go a little more into detail about what I'm actually doing. So let me go ahead and make a new layer because this is getting ugly. So if I have a major alarm, I have to make a work order, right? For the work order for a major alarm, everywhere is going to be different depending on what it is. If it's a network century, I'm going to create a network century work order. If it is a switch, I'll make a switch work order. I'm just making these up, but that's basically it. I will dispatch those out, which just means to call the tech that would deal with that. We don't actually fix that much. Sometimes we can remotely. I can remotely log into some things. Sometimes the systems are running, but they just crash for whatever reason. I can remotely reset them, things like that. But it's not a ton of troubleshooting unless I get a call incoming. Now let me get to the calls incoming because this is where it gets a little more interesting. So I'm just going to break down my day because I think this is the easiest way to do it. Let me break down this day. I get to work 6 a.m. I work till 4 p.m., right? Probably from 6 to 8, I don't get a ton of calls. I might get a couple people heading to sites to work on things. Because the thing about being a quasi-government, being somewhat high security, we have to document whenever anybody's on any of the sites that we monitor. We monitor nationwide sites. It's kind of annoying. Sometimes it's redundant because people call in just to check in so we know who's there because we see door alarms. So if anyone is on a site, they need to call in. If they don't call in, most of the time we send the police, whatever local police. And that's another thing. It's like a wild hunt every time you see an alarm that's a real alarm that you have to deal with because you have to go through 10 steps to figure out, okay, what do I do with this alarm? So it might take 5 minutes just to see what to do before you even start making calls. But I say it's, somewhat high security. I guess if you're calling the police, if there's not a door alarm, it's pretty high security, right? Um, so I don't want to make it sound minor. But 6 to 8, we're not getting that many calls. A lot of people are asleep. A lot of people aren't using these systems, so we're not getting that many calls, right? Probably 8. So I get on the phone at 6:30. So I get there at 6, then it takes a little minute. 6:30, I get on the phone. That's when the shift before me, it's a 24-hour knock, they get off the phone. So I get on the phone at 6:30. I'm on the phone till at least 1:30. 1:30 is when the next shift comes in. So at 1:30, they give me other tasks, which I'll get to. But so from 6:30 to 1:30, I'm on the phone. I typically get anywhere from 20 to 55 calls. And most of these are just calls checking into sites. So most of them are pretty simple. A lot of sites, because there are some user affecting things, like let's just say, for example, I'm going with the network century or the switch. If they have to do some work on the network century or the switch, I might have to call the people that's going to affect. So they might call in and I have to call the manager somewhere to let them know that they're about to drop service. Then I have to call them when service is back up. Then the person has to call when they check out. You see? So one call might turn into 4 calls because they're never going to get on site without 2 calls because they have to check in, they have to leave. Then a lot of times they're going to have to call while they're on site. So one job might be, 3 calls. They're simple calls, but I am on the phone quite a bit. Most of the calls I deal with within a couple minutes, really. But so yeah, I get 20 to 55 calls. Then from 1:30 to 4, they have a lot of various tasks for me. I actually end up doing some administrative work. I'm sending out invoices sometimes. Sometimes I'm putting stickers on things. They really find me some random shit to do. I'm not gonna lie, but I don't mind. It's kind of chill. Makes the day go by a little quicker. Sometimes I get a break from the calls and just looking at alarms. It gets boring, so it's kind of nice for a change. One of my tasks we have this DHCP server, right? And on different devices we have backups. So you'll have the running one. So this one's live, and then you have the backup one. And these are on different computers. So I remote desktop into both, and there's a giant list of DHCP leases. So the DHCP leases list like the MAC address, the IP address, that type of thing. And what I do is I check this MAC and make sure the backup MAC is the same. So that's one of my tasks for way too many devices that I want to say. So, this is kind of a rough outline of the type of boring stuff that goes on at a NOC. If you think it sounds kind of boring, it's because it is. It is kind of boring. If you think it sounds kind of complicated and confusing, it's because it is. It can be complicated and confusing. Definitely a lot of my job could theoretically be automated, but it's also one of those things where the company wants like a human touch to everything. I don't mind because I have a job, but a lot of it could be automated, like even the work order thing. When I said the network century, if I see a problem, they could make it an email system, but that's just not how they run it. So I'm not complaining. I have a job. Uh, it definitely keeps you busy looking at these alarms all day, and it's definitely boring. I do have some time to study on the clock, but the problem is you never really know when you're going to get a call. So while I can read in the downtime, I still have the responsibility of the alarms. And on top of the responsibility of the alarms, you don't want to miss something, do a bad job. Uh, I get random calls. So, I did study for my CCNA while I was at work. So as far as like studying, you could do some labs and stuff. I did Boson labs online, so I could just log in from the web portal. Definitely got a lot of studying in. The night guys, they get like maybe 5 calls for their 10-hour shift. From what they say, sometimes they get more, sometimes they don't get any, but they definitely have a little more time to study because they're not getting interrupted. But you still have to pay attention to stuff, so it can kind of suck when you're studying and you're trying to read and you're really focused in and you get interrupted. You're like, oh, okay, let me deal with this. You deal with it, you check the alarms, you get back to studying. Oh, okay, I'm studying. Bam, another one. Eventually I just get too irritated by getting interrupted so much. I'm like, I'll just read at my house. But that is my day at a network operations center. This is what I do. And I have 4 10-hour shifts. Sometimes I work overtime if they need me to. It's really not a bad job. It's really pretty boring. I definitely want to do more networking stuff. Every now and then I do some networking stuff, but for the most part, it's kind of more of a call center administrative type task job. And I think if you're looking for a network operations center technician job, you're going to get a lot of this muddy, muddy boundaries of like what your job actually is. Is it tech? Is it maybe administrative? Are you sending out invoices? Are you in a call center? You might be all of those things. So just, if you want to work in a knock, be prepared to do anything. Go in with a good attitude. Don't take stuff personal. You'll do pretty good.